Welcome back. We've got big news in another huge trial that we are tracking here on Court TV, the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. 3 defendants in that case, Travis and Greg McMichael, the father-son duo in one pickup, and then Roddy Bryant, the third defendant, in another pickup with his cell phone recording everything. Well, we've got a trial date now. Let's put it up on the screen. Here we go, folks. Jury selection begins October 18th, 2021. October 18th, 2021, jury selection begins in the trial of the 3 men accused in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Now, for those of you who don't recall what happened that day, Ted Rowlands has the story.
In the first few seconds of the Ahmaud Arbery shooting video, it's clear that Roddy Bryant, the person recording, is also driving. 5 seconds in, we see Ahmaud for the first time. He appears to be running at a consistent pace. At 9 seconds, we get the first look at the truck stopped in the road. The driver's side door is open. The man standing outside is Travis McMichael. He is armed with a shotgun. Standing in the back of the truck is Travis's father, Greg. He's armed with a handgun. 2 things to notice here as the camera starts to move erratically. Watch Ahmaud as he appears to realize what's in front of him. He decides to go around the truck on the right-hand side to avoid Travis. Now, watch it again and think about Roddy Bryant, who is shooting the video. He keeps driving towards the evolving situation, and then listen. That sound raises the question, is Brian cocking a handgun from inside the car? Brian maintains he was unarmed. As we break down the next sequence frame by frame, we see Ahmaud on the passenger side of the McMichael's pickup. In the next frame, we can only see Greg McMichael, who appears to be holding a phone in his ear with his left hand. We know his right hand is holding a pistol. Now we see that Travis McMichael has moved from the driver's side to the front of the truck with his shotgun, presumably to confront Ahmaud. His right leg shows his knees are bent, his head is looking forward. In the next frame, we see Travis has now stepped back, and this is when we hear the first gunshot. The next frame clearly shows that Travis is being pushed back and Ahmaud has his hands on the rifle. Watch as Ahmaud releases his hands and hits Travis, first with his left hand, then with his right, as the struggle moves out of frame. Greg, meanwhile, now in the back of the pickup, puts his phone down and appears to ready his pistol. Then another shot. And we see smoke coming from the struggle. At 27 seconds into the video, Travis and Ahmaud can be seen again struggling over the rifle. Watch right here. Ahmaud pulls his right hand off to try to hit Travis. This gives way to the final shot. The final frame of the 36-second video shows father and son each holding a firearm standing in the street with Ahmaud Arbery laying on the ground, dying.
Again, October 18th, that's the big news tonight. Trial date has been set for jury selection, but there's a huge hearing happening next week that we're covering here on Court TV. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae. Julia, what can you tell us about what's happening next week?
Vinny, 3 days of next week will involve appearances in court for these defendants, starting with May 11th. We're talking about the state case generally, but there's also a federal case in the prosecution of these 3 defendants. They're facing hate crime charges that are by the federal government. They have their initial appearance on May 11th. Then on May 12th and 13th, going back to the state case against these 3, there's a motions hearing where the judge is going to hear a long list. There's 11 motions that are pending in this case, and they're going to try to get through as many as they can. And then, of course, we just learned today that October 18th is going to be the trial date. Jury selection will start there in Glenn County, Georgia.
All right, what can you tell us about some of these motions next week and how significant they are?
Well, there's a lot of evidence that these parties want to get either before the jury or want to exclude. Now, the defendants are trying to get in information about Ahmaud Arbery's past, his criminal history, prior bad acts that they believe should be relevant to this case, and what was in Ahmaud Arbery's mind that day when he was there in the Satilla Shores area. The state has a competing motion in limine to keep the character of the victim out. They say it is irrelevant to this this case and that those defendants weren't aware of that history at the time that they decided to chase down Ahmaud Arbery. There's also a motion to exclude jail calls by defendant Gregory McMichael, who made some phone calls that were recorded and played in front of the judge a few months ago in a motions hearing. Show him talking about this case and even saying some things about no good deed going unpunished. The prosecution says he was talking about the death of Arbery, and they want to get that in front of a jury. So a lot of issues that this judge is going to be working through.
Well, you mentioned the federal charges. Let's put them up on the screen because this, again, is a relatively new development in this case. You've got interference with civil rights and attempted kidnapping. That's for all three defendants, Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, and Roddy Bryant, who is not related to those two but lives in the neighborhood. Also, for the McMichaels, carrying and brandishing firearms during a crime of violence. And that's just for the father and son who were in the lead pickup in that chase through the neighborhood. So, putting this in perspective, I look at this case and the state charges are life without the possibility of parole. So it seems that if they can get a conviction in the fall, then whatever happens in the federal case is, it's relevant, but it's irrelevant in terms of they're never getting out if they're convicted of the felony murder.
Well, the big caveat with those federal charges is that they are hate crime charges, something that was not available in Georgia when the actual charges were brought against these defendants back in May of last year. In fact, today is 1 year to the day when Travis McMichael and Gregory McMichael were arrested. Tomorrow would have been Ahmaud Arbery's birthday, and we know next week they're having that first appearance in that hate crimes case. So I think that's the difference with the federal case. There was this cry over these three men targeting Ahmaud Arbery for his race, and that's what the federal case addresses, something that the state is unable to just because of the lack of legislation in Georgia. Yeah,
it seems though they'll have a more difficult case because now they've got to prove that the motivation was race, and I'm wondering when the race comes into play. Because the day of the chase, from the statements that have been made by the defendants, is we are chasing the guy that we saw in the video. And Ahmaud Arbery is the guy in the video. So are they alleging that they shouldn't have? And I'm trying to figure out what the theory is going to be for federal prosecutors. Because in their press release, they said basically counts 1 and 2 in the indictment allege the defendants used force and threats to intimidate and interfere with Arbery's right to use a public street because of his race. Whereas their statements are they were chasing him because he was in the video and they mistakenly thought that he was committing a crime in that vacant house that was under construction.
They'll likely have to do a lot of digging into what may have been their state of mind. We know that the state, in the case that's there in Glenn County, they aren't able to talk about hate crimes, but they've hinted to possible racial motivation for this alleged crime, and they brought it out in other motions hearings. They've talked about the statement that Travis McMichael allegedly made after shooting Ahmaud Arbery. Roddy Bryant, his co-defendant, was the person who let officials know that right after the shooting that he said a expletive and then the N-word when he's looking over Arbery's body. They also looked at the cell phone records and social media posts of all of these men, and there were several racially charged messages back and forth. That's another thing that's on this motions list for next week, that the judge is going to rule on whether those posts and comments that were found in those digital records will be able to come in front of this jury. That's something the state is pushing for.
Yeah, so next week's state hearing could give us a big preview of what's going to happen in the federal case as well. Okay, there was something else that happened in this case that I was very surprised about. The lead prosecutor resigned, and this is someone who is very experienced in high-profile cases. He was part of the prosecution team in the hot car death case. Jesse Evans, what's going on there?
Yeah, this is Chief Deputy Jesse Evans there in Cobb County, and he has resigned from his position. So he was the lead prosecutor on this case there in Cobb County, and he is no longer going to be working on it. He was very visible during those motions hearing. We saw him out in front questioning the GBI, standing behind the district attorney of Cobb County during press conferences when they were able to get bond denied for the defendants. So he has been a noticeable face on this case, but he has resigned, and his case is going to be transferred to Linda Dunikowski, who we've also seen. She's a second chair who has been at the motions hearing. She wasn't leading things, but was doing some of the examination of the witnesses on the stand. So she will now be the one taking over this case there in Cobb County.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with her work. I've seen Jesse in the courtroom. He's good. This is it's a big loss, but she may be just as good. So we'll find out a lot on Tuesday, right? Well, Tuesday in federal court, but Wednesday and Thursday right here on Court TV, we're going to have those hearings from Glenn County.
That's correct. We'll have those hearings. They will likely take the entire day for both days. That's what happened the last time we had a motions hearing. It went until the very, very end. The judge is from out of town, so he is using this courtroom in Glenn County while he is there. So he wants to make sure he gets as much done during that time, just to make sure he is finishing things up before he goes back to what is actually his home circuit.
All right. Julie Janae, Court TV legal correspondent, getting ready for a big week next week. Thank you so much.